Good evening. Welcome to Lecture 4, Week 4, Lecture 1. Welcome to Week 4, Lecture 1, Theory of Perfect Competition. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the 4 basic characteristics of perfectly competitive firm. And then we're going to draw the implications of those characteristics. Next, we are going to study the way prices are determined in a perfectly competitive market. The way prices get determined in a perfectly competitive market is quite different from the way price get determined in the industry. Now, in the industry, we know that prices and quantities are determined through the interaction of demand and supply. But this is not the case for perfectly competitive firm or perfectly competitive markets. So the firm in a perfectly competitive market takes price as given. In other words, it has no influence on the prices prevailing in the markets. It has no influence on the price is charged for its products. So the industry makes the price, and then the firm takes that particular price to sell its products. So we're gonna discuss that one later on when we look at concept of price and output determination in a perfectly competitive market. So let's go ahead and get started. A perfectly competitive firm is a firm that serves a small part of the market. Its output is so small relative to the overall market demand that it has little or no significant effects on the market price. Likewise, one particular buyer's purchase is so small relative to the overall purchases in the market that that particular buyer's purchase has little or no effect on the market price. The firm can sell whatever quantity it wishes to sell at the prevailing market price. Now, one typical example of a perfectly competitive firm is the peanut sellers. Now, we see large number of peanut sellers. They sell homogeneous products. In other words, the product they sell is identical. The product seller one sells is not different from what the next seller sells. So they all charge the same price, and at the same time, they all sell identical products. Now, the same applies to fruit sellers. Now, you see a bunch of fruit sellers, they all sell the same crop, same commodities, same vegetables, the same fruits, types of fruits. So they charge the same price, and nobody in that particular market or no seller has any power to influence the market price. The same applies to vegetable sellers. You have a large number of these sellers, each of them selling their products at the prevailing market price. So if one particular seller decides to sell more by increasing the price, it is going to lose customers because the product that it sells is identical to the product the other sellers sell. So what is going to happen that if he raises price, now consumers or buyers will move to other sellers because they can get the products from other sellers, the same product from other sellers at a cheaper price. So this is the reason why we say that this particular firm is a price taker. It does not set the price. So he has no power to increase the price. So he has to sell his goods at the prevailing market price. Now, the firm has zero market power. Because perfectly competitive industry is fragmented in the sense that we have large number of buyers and sellers. Because the industry is fragmented, firms have little or no power to set the price at which to sell their products. This implies that they have zero market power. All the firms in the market have to charge the given market, charge their products, have to charge the given market price or risk losing sales by a large amount. So the price at which they sell is the prevailing market price. If they decide to sell at a price above that one, they are going to lose customers. And again, if they decide to sell at a price below that, they are not going to make economic profits. Even though at the lower price, below the equilibrium price or the market price, the marginal cost is lower, but the opportunity cost is very high. And so because of that, they are going to go out of business. They will lose customers, and the same, even though the price that they charge is very low, lower than the market price, they will not stay in business because they are not going to make economic profits. So this is the reason why we say this firm is a price taker. The firm in a perfectly competitive market is a price taker. It takes the price that is made in the industry. So the industry makes the price, and then the firm in a perfectly competitive market takes the price as given. He uses that price to sell his products. So his products will be sold at the prevailing market price. If he decides to charge a higher price, he's going to go out of business. He's going to lose customers because there are so many, the product that he sells is homogeneous. So you have numerous sellers selling the same product or similar products. So consumers or buyers will tend to move to other sellers or buy other sellers' products since they can get those products at a cheaper price if one seller decides to increase the price. Or if one seller again decides to lower the price below the market price, he is going to go out of business because at the lower price, even though the marginal cost is low, but the opportunity cost at that particular lower price is very high. So the firm is going to go out of business. Now let's look at the characteristics of perfectly competitive markets. The first characteristic is that a perfectly competitive market is fragmented. This implies that the market consists of many sellers, many buyers, and sellers. The purchases of any buyer are so small relative to the overall purchases in the market that they have an insignificant effect on the market price. Similarly, each seller's output is so small relative to the market demand that it has an insignificant effect on the market price. So because each seller's output is so small, when we look at the overall market demand, we compare its output with the overall market demand. That output is smaller, is so small that it has little effect or little influence on the market price. So that is why we say the perfectly competitive market is fragmented. It has a large number of buyers and sellers. So because of the fragmentation of the perfectly competitive market, all the firms in that market are regarded as price takers. So sellers and buyers act as price takers. That is, they take the price of the product as given when making an output decision or a purchase decision. So whenever the buyer wants to make a purchase decision, they have to take the price in the market as given. So that's why we say the buyer in the perfectly competitive market is a price taker. Likewise, the seller is also a price taker because whenever he wants to make output decisions, he's going to take the price in the market as given. So it does not set the price, but it takes price as given to sell its products. Now, the second characteristic is that market produce homogeneous products. In other words, the products are undifferentiated. All the products that they sell is the same. So whether you have 20, maybe 1,000 sellers in the market, they all sell identical products. They all sell the same commodity. So because they sell the same commodity, because consumers perceive the product to be identical in every respect. So because they sell this particular commodity, because they sell the same commodities, homogeneous products, it implies that there is the law of one price here. That is to say, transactions between buyers and sellers occur at a single market price. They all charge the same price. Because all the products are homogeneous, they have to charge the same market price. So all transactions that occur in a perfectly competitive market between the buyers and sellers occur at a single price. So that is why we say this particular characteristics implies the law of one price. The third characteristic is that in a perfectly competitive market, there is perfect information about the prices. Consumers or buyers are fully aware of the prices that the sellers charge for the product in the market. So a knowledge of the prices prevailing in the market determines the buying decisions of the market or of the consumers. So again here, we are still assuming the law of one price, that all the transactions that take place in the market, all the transactions between the buyers and the sellers occur at a single price, and that price is the one that prevails in the market. So they all sell their products at the same price, at one particular price, because all their products are homogeneous. They are undifferentiated. Because all their products are undifferentiated and consumers are fully aware of the prices that the sellers charge for the products in the market. They know what the prices are. So they have perfect information about the prices that are charged in a perfectly competitive market. So we say that all transactions occur at a single price, a single market price. Now, the fourth characteristic is that the perfectly competitive market is characterized by equal access to resources. So every farm, including prospective farms in the market, have the same access to technology and inputs to produce the good. They have the same technology, they have the same access to technology, same access to inputs, raw materials, capital, etc., to produce the good. Now, what does this imply? Because all potential farms or existing farms have the same access to technology, have the same access to inputs, we say there is free entry here. There is free entry and exits. Every farm can enter the industry or leave the industry. Farms can enter the industry if they realize, if potential farms realize that existing farms are making supernormal profits. If they know that they are making positive profits or supernormal profits, then the potential farms will decide to enter the industry. So as they enter, they have access to the same technology and inputs that the existing farms have. So here there is free entry and exit. So again, every farm is free to leave the industry if it is not making profit or if it is making abnormal profits. That is, if it is making a loss. If any farm is making a loss in this particular industry, they are free to leave. They can leave the industry. They can go out of business if they are not making any profit. If they continue to make loss, then they can leave the industry. So there is free exit, entry and exit. So this is the assumption of equal access to resources. That perfectly competitive industry is characterized by equal access to resources. So existing as well as potential farms in the market have the same access to technology and inputs to produce the good. Now let's look at the pricing in a perfectly competitive market. Now, as I said earlier, prices are determined differently in a perfectly competitive market relative to the market as a whole, relative to the industry. In the whole market, prices are determined by the interaction of demand and supply. Now, the point where the demand and supply intersect gives both the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Of course, we know this one before. Now, prices are determined through the interaction of demand and supply. So where they meet is the market price. So as a matter of fact, the industry makes the price that the perfectly competitive market used to charge to sell its products. So in a perfectly competitive market, the way prices are determined in a perfectly competitive market is through the interaction of all the farms in the entire market. Is through the interaction of all the farms in the market. So all the farms in the industry, they interact, and through their interaction, we have a price, and that price is the one that the perfectly competitive market farm used to sell its product. So he sells its product at that predetermined price, the price that has been made by the industry. So why is that? This is because the perfectly competitive farm is a price taker. Is a price taker. It has no influence on the price at which it sells its products. It cannot influence the price. The output that it produces is so small relative to the market demand that it has any significant effect on the market price. So if it decides to sell more by increasing the price above the equilibrium price or the market set, the price set by the market or the industry, is going to lose a lot of customers. The reason is that there are many farms in the market selling the same commodity that it sells. So consumers or buyers will find the commodities sold by the other farms in the industry at a cheaper price. So they will tend to buy the commodities sold by the other farms if this farm decides to sell above the market price. Similarly, if it decides to sell below the equilibrium price or the prevailing market price, what will happen is it will go out of business because it is not making economic profit. It is not profitable to sell below the market price because it is not making economic profits. Even though its marginal cost is very low, but its opportunity cost is very high. Because of that, it will go out of business. So this is the reason why we say that the farm in a perfectly competitive market is a price taker. It has no influence on the prices that prevail in the market. Now let's look at this diagram here. As I was saying, that in the industry, the price is determined through the interaction of demand and supply. Now you see the supply curve and the demand curve. Now they intersect at this particular point. And at that point, a price is given, which is the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity of the industry. Now, if we try to look at this price, this is the price that the perfectly competitive farm is going to use to sell its products. Now, as you can see, the price here is equal to the marginal revenue. Now, the reason why this particular industry, the perfectly competitive farm, is selling at this price is because it is a price taker. It has no influence on the market price. It cannot increase the price of its product above this market price. If it decides to do that, it's going to be at point B here. Even though it's producing a lot of quantity, a lot of output, but because this price is above the equilibrium price, it's going to lose a lot of customers. This is because this farm produces the same product as the other farms in the industry. And if these other farms are charging the market at the market price, it means consumers will find the goods sold by those other farms cheaper relative to the farm who decides to increase the price. So they are now going to buy the goods that are cheaper. Since in a perfectly competitive market, in a perfectly competitive market, all the products that the sellers sell are homogeneous. They are undifferentiated. Because they are undifferentiated, They all have to sell at the same price. If anyone decides to increase the price, he's going to lose sales. So at point B here, we see that the price that the perfectly competitive farm decides to sell is P, which is greater than the P star, the prevailing market price. So at this particular point, the farm is going to lose sales because consumers find the goods they want to buy at a cheaper price from other sellers. They can buy the same product from other sellers at a cheaper price. So that's why the farm that charges a higher price above the equivalent price is going to lose sales, a lot of sales. So as this occurs, the drop in sales here will move this arrow from point B to point E. So it will decide to lose sales and then move all the way up to point E. Similarly, if the farm decides to sell at a lower price, that is at point A, that is the price at which it decides to sell is lower than the equivalent price or the market price. So what will happen here is that it's not going to make a lot of profits. It's not going to make economic profits here. So at this point, at point A, even though its marginal cost is very low relative to the marginal cost at point E, but because its opportunity cost is very high, it's going to go out of business if it decides to sell at this lower price. So the only price that is going to sell at is P star, which is at A, and then the quantity that it produces is Q star. So this is how prices are determined in a perfectly competitive market. So just as I said, prices are determined in industry in a different way through the interaction of demand and supply. So where they meet is the price at which the industry sells, and then the amount, the quantity refers to the industry, the quantity of the industry. So if we try to look at that particular aspect, we see that the price that the industry charges, which is as a result of what? The interaction of all the farms in the industry. When they come up, they make the price, and the price that they make is what the perfectly competitive farm is going to use to sell its products. So this is how prices are determined in a perfectly competitive market. So I want you to go over this one, and then next time we're going to look at profit maximization in a perfectly competitive industry. And then we're going to look at the short run and the long run situation. Then we see how the farm makes abnormal or supernormal profits, and then what is the shutdown point of the farm in a perfectly competitive market, and then when is he making a loss? So at what point is he going to leave the industry? Now, we know that every seller, existing sellers or farms in the market, as well as potential farms who want to enter the industry, they all have access to resources. They all have access to the same technology, to the same amount of inputs that are used. So because of this, there is what? Free entry and exit. So every farm can enter the industry if they realize that the existing farms are making supernormal profits. So if the existing farms are making supernormal profits, then potential farms will decide to enter the industry to absorb that supernormal profits. Similarly, if existing firms are making a loss in the industry, then they are free to leave the industry. They are free to exit. So the exit decision depends on the amount, depends on the loss that is incurred by the existing firms. Say, for example, existing firms are not able to innovate, bring in new ideas to improve on the quality of their products, then they are going to leave the industry. Now, this is the case of if those of you have done growth, economic growth, or economic development, you will see that the Schumpeterian analysis here is talking about creative destruction. Now, for all firms that are able to innovate, firms that are able to bring in new ideas, to develop, to improve on the quality of the product, these firms are going to stay in business. So if you are not able to innovate, you are not able to bring in new ideas to improve the quality of the product, then you are going to leave the industry. You will be kicked out of the industry. So this is what the creative destruction theory is trying to talk about. Now, new firms killing the old firms, because the old firms in the industry are not able to innovate. They only cling on old ideas, to make their product. Their product is not of very good quality. So for those new firms that enter the industry with new ideas, with new innovation, these particular firms are able to stay in the business. They are able to stay in the business because they are able to improve on the quality of their products. So for firms that are able to do that, they have the potential to stay in business. For those that are not able to do that, they are going to exit. So that is the creative destruction here. So those who are able to innovate, they are driving away those who are not able to innovate. They are kicking them out of the business because they do not have the ideas to improve on their products. They cannot improve on their products, so because their products are of inferior quality relative to those who are able to innovate, those who are able to improve on the quality of the product, those new products are going to drive the old product out of the business. So that is the creative destruction. So I'm going to stop here for today.